Well, hello, and welcome to YouTube. I suppose that's a silly thing to say. You live here anyway. But never mind. My name is Ian, and welcome to my YouTube channel if this is your first time. If it's not, then welcome back. For a number of months now, I've been getting requests to rank the Jethro Tull live mixes, specifically the ones from the box sets. This dates back to a video that I did 3 months ago now, which is one of my most watched videos to this very day. And that is where I ranked the Steven Wilson remixes of the albums. So this is a sequel, a direct sequel to that video, in which I will be focusing entirely on the box set mixes, which means that certain things are immediately disqualified. And that includes the Carnegie Hall 1970 performance, which was included as part of the stand-up edition from around 2010 or so. We won't be talking about that. It also disqualifies Isle of Wight, which I think does have a 5.1 mix, but isn't included in this stream. And I'm also disqualifying, but I want to give an honorable mention to Live in Montreux 2003, because in the process of research for this video, I did watch this again, and it's fantastic, and it sounds fantastic too. And for those of you who maybe watched my Christmas album review and found that I was kind of not that moved by it, I think this is proof that in 2003, Jethro Tull still had some fire live. And there's a couple of songs even that appear on the Christmas album, and they are much better here. But one more note on recordings that are disqualified. I am disqualifying any recording from these box sets, any live recording that wasn't remixed by either Steven Wilson or Jocko Jaksic. And this is because I want to save those for another video. Actually, at some point, I intend to talk about all of the live recordings with my friend Jocko, not Jocko Jaksic, but my friend Jocko, who's contributed to some of our discussions here on the channel. But we won't be talking about Chicago 1970, which is included on the Benefit box set. We won't be talking about the demo recordings on the Broadsword and the Beast box set because they may or may not be live. And we certainly won't be talking about the Den Haag, Netherlands 1980 show, which is included on the Stormwatch box set. So without any further ado, let's get down to business. So this is a ranking video, and some choices were rather difficult. It was a very easy choice to pick my least favorite and a very easy choice to pick my number one, which is my absolute top favorite. So let's start at number 8, because there are only 8 mixes. This isn't even really a top 10. This is a top 8. But at number 8, I have Paris, the 5th of July, 1975, included on the Minstrel in the Gallery La Grande edition. This was mixed for stereo and 5.1 surround sound by Jocko Jaksic, the King Crimson frontman, singer, guitar player. This was an easy choice for me, simply because of all of the mixes that are at my fingertips, basically, thanks to these wonderful box sets. This is the most frustrating and disappointing. And there's a couple of factors that make it dead last for me. Number one is the performance. There are quite simply better performances from this tour and era of Jethro Tull's history, but unfortunately they exist as audience recordings. There aren't any really good multi-track recordings. And it just so happens, this is how life works, that, and you know, you hear somebody like Frank Zappa talk about this. Whenever there is a pro recording happening, the law of averages states that somebody in the band is going to be sick, or, you know, something outside of the performer's control is going to affect the performance. And in this case, Ian Anderson has a head cold, and he starts out strong enough throughout the first half of the show or so, but gradually his voice begins to decline. and it becomes nearly unlistenable for me. In fact, I think that his voice at some points in this is actually worse than it was forward, like 80s, 90s, and more recent decades, after he caused significant damage to his voice. It's just a poor performance, and this is not his fault. You know what I mean? This is something that was completely out of his control, but as far as listening goes, this is something that makes it dead last for me when I want to hear something, when I want to hear like a really great Jethro Tull live recording. This is probably the last one I'd reach for. However, there are some issues with the performance of other band members that I don't necessarily want to get into in detail. However, there's another problem with this recording, and that's that an entire reel of it is missing, which is about 25 minutes. And that 25 minutes contains all of the War Child material, which, along with Minstrel in the Gallery, were the albums they were supporting at the time. So not only do you get a weakened performance from Anderson, but you also miss some of the most important songs from a historical perspective. And it ends up being kind of a greatest hits collection. I mean, none of these were radio hits aside from maybe Bungle in the Jungle, but these are songs that are kind of commonly performed. There are a couple of exceptions, one of which is Critique Oblique, which is a track from my favorite Jethro Tull album, A Passion Play. So I'm actually very happy to have that here. Also, you have Wondering Aloud with the string section that toured with him at this time. And it has an extra verse, which is actually taken from Wondering Again, which is kind of the other half of that composition, which was released on Living in the Past in 1972. So for somebody like me who actually prefers Wondering Again to Wondering Aloud, that was like a really exciting discovery to hear Ian stick that extra verse into Wondering Aloud. So I'm not saying that this recording is completely without merit. There's actually a number of things that I like about it, but this contributes to the frustrating nature of it. And the final comment is in the mixing itself. Now, you're going to find in the course of this list that I'm not a big fan of Jaka Jaksik's work. I think he's okay, but to be honest with you, he hasn't done a mix that I've fully loved and embraced. Not even Thrack, the King Crimson mix that he did. Even Thrack, I have issues with. So in this case, it sounds good. It sounds, you can hear things very clearly and distinctly. But it seems like the keyboards are mixed louder than the drums and the guitar, especially, and they're all justified to the back, and they seem to overtake the rest of the mix to my ears. Now, you could simply turn your back channels down, and that's what I do. Whenever I listen to this, I just turn those back channels down. But as I said in my Best of 2024 video, I really feel that a great mix should just sound great out of the box. You shouldn't have to adjust it at all. You should be able to play it flat and have it sound fantastic. So these concerns, the performance issues, the missing reel, which had the reel contained the songs Aqualung and Locomotive Breath that we've heard a million times, I probably wouldn't care that much. But since it contains special material to this particular era that we don't get to hear a lot, it's a huge drawback for me that reel is missing. And then finally, the mix itself makes it a really easy choice for last place. But you know what? Last place Jethro Tull is still worth hearing now and then. Their worst is still better for me than many bands' best. So I still do really like this recording. I just want to emphasize how frustrating it is. All right, moving on. So at number 7, I have Live in Tanglewood, 1970. This was included on the Benefit box set. This is actually the redo Benefit. The original version of this did not include any concerts. But when they reissued it as a book set in 2021, they included 2 concerts, including Chicago 1970, which despite being a mono mix and having issues stemming from the fact that it's a front of house desk recording, I actually kind of prefer Chicago to the multi-track recording, but since that's disqualified, I'm just going to talk about Tanglewood. So why is Tanglewood number 7? Well, first off, this era of Jethro Tull live is not my favorite. I think that they're still developing, especially Ian Anderson and Martin Barre are not quite fully formed to my ears. I think that perhaps the strongest member of the band at this point, instrumentally speaking, was probably drummer Clive Bunker, who's incredible. His hands are an absolute blur during many parts of his solo and other songs included. And I also think Glenn Cornick was rather good, as was the new guy at the time, John Evan. So you do have really 3 strong members backing them up. But the thing that holds this particular era of Jethro Tull back for me is that it's very improvisationally heavy. And I don't have issue with great improvisation. I love when Frank Zappa's bands improvise after a certain point. I love jazz in general as a genre. But I think that what happens here is that every band member gets a featured solo and they go on forever. Like the flute solo in My God, it probably isn't 12 minutes, but it feels like 12 minutes. It just feels like it's never going to end. And I don't feel like improvisation was ever really Jethro Tull's strong suit. So the fact that this particular concert focuses on improvisation makes it a bit tough going for me, I have to admit. And it was rather difficult to decide between this one and Paris 75, which one was my least favorite. But I give this the edge simply because it captures Jethro Tull at a very formative stage. And especially if you listen to the BBC recordings, which are included on the This Was box set and the Stand Up box set, you can hear that Jethro Tull had evolved quite a bit as musicians at this point. They're not what they would become yet, but they've come a long way already since the beginning, and it hints at future greatness. Also, Steven Wilson's mix is rather good here. Now, there were some issues with the source material, specifically John Evans' piano, which had some distortion problems. So Steven Wilson kind of mitigated this issue by sending it through a plugin, which gives it kind of a digitized sound that I'm not always crazy about, but I understand why he did it. Now, I feel like had he done this mix now, there are plugins that could reduce distortion. They are AI plugins, so I don't know how open he would be to using them, or the audience would be to him using them. But I think had this been redone now, it might have a chance of being better actually. But for 2021, it's listenable. It's okay. It just bothers me on occasion. But the set list is decent. You get Nothing Is Easy, which is a great version. You get an early version of My God, which would be recorded for the Aqualung album, with You There to Help Me, and By Kind Permission of, Dahmer for One, We Used to Know, and For a Thousand Mothers. I just think that the Live in Chicago set, which has 11 tracks as opposed to only 8, they make room for those extra songs by cutting back on the improvisation, and you get like an excellent version of To Cry You a Song on Live in Chicago. So even though the sound quality isn't quite there and it's not a multi-track mix, it's not a 5.1 mix, it's just a mono mix, in many ways I prefer Live in Chicago in 1970 to Tanglewood. Also, another cool thing about this that still makes me give it the edge over Paris 1975 is that it is a video. You do get to see a primitive form of Jethro Tull with great sound quality. So I really think that it's these things that give it the edge over Paris 75. Now, I forgot to mention that there is a little bit of video included with Paris 75 and that they did film the whole thing. But once again, this is another thing that lends to my frustration with Paris 75, is that those reels of film are long gone. The little bit we get of Minstrel in the Gallery is phenomenal, and it's absolutely one of the box set highlights for me, that we finally got to see the full 8 or 9 minute live version of that with good sound. All right, moving on. So we are now at number 6, Live in Germany, 1982. Now, I think this is an earlier tour recording. It's very, very early on in the tour, so you do get to hear a song or two that was dropped from the set list. The one that comes to mind is Flying Colors, which is a song that I don't recall ever hearing live before. So already, this is a special recording. What holds back Live in Germany 1982 is Ian Anderson's choice of drummer at the time. I really feel like Jerry Conway just wasn't the best choice for Jethro Tull. He was a good choice for the Broadsword and the Beast album, and the songs that are taken from Broadsword and the Beast, such as Flying Colors, or even Clasp or Fallen on Hard Times, Broadsword, these songs come to life on the stage, and they sound great. It's just when Jerry Conway is faced with having to recreate anything originally recorded by Barry Barlow that his limitations as a Jethro Tull drummer start to show. So you hear flubs in classic songs like Heavy Horses or Songs from the Wood, songs that came to life on the stage, the Bursting Out album, or even Madison Square Garden, 1978. So these parts of the concert tend to kind of hold it back for me. But as it stands, this is a very laid-back show. And there's something kind of warm and relaxing about it. And I actually really like the quad mix. It's really a quad plus subwoofer mix, but it's not a full 5.1 mix. But you don't really notice. I think that Steven Wilson's mixing work here makes it sound beautiful and completely immersive. And when I listen to it, I forget that there isn't a center channel. It just doesn't really matter to me. So despite the performance deficiencies, it's actually one of my favorite recordings, simply because there is just a warmth to it, a certain nostalgia to it. And I also feel like this is the era of the band where Martin Barre was starting to take center stage more and more as kind of the de facto second banana to Ian Anderson. And you hear his performance on like Pibroch, Black Satin Dancer, and it's almost approaching like David Gilmour, but it is uniquely Martin and uniquely Tull in its approach. So I actually highly recommend Germany 1982, and it's a sleeper hit for me. When I first heard it, I thought, this performance isn't that great, and it has flaws. And it does certainly have flaws, but once you stop expecting it to be the Bursting Out album and just kind of accept it on its own merits, it's a really enjoyable performance. And I might even say one of my favorites. So the fact that there are 5 recordings yet to go above this, it just goes to show you how much I love these next 5 that I'm about to show you. All right, so moving on, we are now at my number 5, and I grabbed the wrong album. Oops. My number 5 is Berne, Switzerland, 1978, as included on the Heavy Horses New Shoes Edition box set from 2018. Now, already, some of you are going to yell at me, I know, because you think that Berne 78 and Bursting Out are identical. And they are not. Although Bursting Out does include a good chunk of Berne 78, especially the new inflated edition version, which restores the original concert running order. They are quite different in terms of mixing approach as well as performance. So as you know, if you've watched my several videos that I've done, a series of videos that I've done on the Bursting Out album, and I've talked about it at length. That album was a mixture of some stuff from Berne 78, but it also included some 8-track recordings that were taken from a German tour undertaken in 78 with the express desire to record a live album, which I think is really fascinating. But what you have with Berne 78 as presented on the Heavy Horses box set is a warts and all presentation of that Berne 1978 performance. And I listened to this last night, and there's something really strange about the way it's mixed. It's Jocko Joksic again. I don't know what it is, but his mixes don't tend to resonate with me much. And in this case, the mix sounds very distant, like Jethro Tull are, really far away from you. And his placement doesn't necessarily capture the placement of the musicians on stage. Even more frustrating, I have a hard time hearing the keyboard players. And when you have 2 keyboard players in the band and I can't hear them, something's wrong. Now, I can hear them just fine in passages that are kind of quiet, where the dynamics are softer. But I really am struggling to hear them at times when Martin Barre is playing. There's definitely an emphasis on Martin Barre's presence in the mix. Like the bottom end isn't super great, but it's listenable. It's okay. And I feel like if this is all that we had of this material, I would be fine with it. It certainly could be a whole lot worse. I just don't think the mixing is quite up to par with what we get on the Bursting Out set. I've always kind of found it a little underwhelming. And even the performances, which are, really strong, because basically you can throw a dart on any Jethro Tull performance in 1978 and you're going to have a good time. I just think that by Ian Anderson vetting and choosing the best performances from that tour to include on the album does make it a whole lot more satisfying as a listening experience for me. Also, I'm not against overdubbing on live albums, as I've said before, because a live album has to be both. It has to be both live, spontaneous, captured, fly on the wall recording, but it also has to be an album that can be played again and again. And you definitely hear some parts that are out of tune, and it's missing some stuff that where maybe they flub up a note or something like that. And there's certainly an appeal to hearing the warts and all, which is why I'm an advocate of owning both the version of this that's on the Heavy Horses box set and also the Bursting Out album, which is more of a creation by Ian Anderson. So I know this is rather low, but it still makes the top 5. So you're going to see, and I'm hopefully going to explain why the 4 recordings that I'm about to talk about I like a lot more. So at number 5, Berne 78 is included on the Heavy Horses New Shoes edition. In 1978, following the release of the Bursting Out album, Jethro Tull went on tour to promote it. And part of this tour ended up at Madison Square Garden. And this performance was broadcast live internationally. And this meant that Jethro Tull made history, because this was the first internationally broadcast live performance in history. And there was this kind of nervousness that it might not come off well, obviously. And this, of course, was captured and mixed for the Bursting Out box set, which came out this year. And this was mixed by Steven Wilson once again. And I have always loved this performance. And what keeps me from calling it the quintessential Jethro Tull live document is a little bit of, I feel bad about it because John Glasscock isn't present. However, Tony Williams does an excellent job filling in for him. And If you're not super familiar with Tull's lineup, you might not even really notice that there's something different here. Now, the one thing that I would criticize is that obviously there's a section of this that was broadcast where you can see and hear what's going on, but on the last two releases of this, including the one that was mixed, I think, by Peter Mew and came out like 2009-ish, they have included the non-broadcast portion of the recording, and I find these performances a little tame, a little safe, and not particularly exciting. And another issue that I take with them is that there's some flubs, there's some mistakes, and it's not as strong as, say, the Bursting Out album or Live in Berne 78. However, the portion that was actually broadcast, the band come to life, and they seem to be having a great time. And it's almost like that added pressure, that added anxiety of, this being history being made, and, this may not work out the way we intend. I feel like this gave the band a little extra kick. So the performance of, say, like Thick as a Brick, to me, that is the quintessential vintage Jethro Tull video document. It may not be the quintessential audio document, but it is the quintessential video document, and it just gives me chills every time I listen to it. Now, Steven Wilson's mix really brings this to life, and it is so much better than the previous version of this. It's just not even close. In addition to giving it a really full and robust sound that just leaps out of your speakers and makes you feel like you are there. When I listen to this, I feel like I am sitting on stage listening to Jethro Tull play. In addition to that, Steven has also corrected a lot of sonic issues that occurred as a result of the broadcast. And if you listen to the previously released version, there's a part during the flute solo where I have to hold my ears. It's not for the reason that many people hold their ears during the flute solo. It's because there's some sort of awful feedback or hum. And on this version of it, the feedback or hum is inaudible. You might hear like a little bit of artifacting that suggests that something might have been there, but you really would only notice that if you're familiar with prior versions. So I think this is a 10 out of 10 job, and one of the reasons why the Bursting Out box set is one of the most beloved items in my Jethro Tull physical media collection. All right, so at number 3, I have Live at the LA Sports Arena 1980. This was recorded on the A tour and included on the A la mode box set, which is one of my very favorite Jethro Tull box sets, by the way. I adore this thing, and I think it's hugely underrated, but that's a topic for another day. It's a sparkling performance. If you're looking for a safe, laid back, kind of easy listening version of Jethro Tull, this ain't it, folks. This is Jethro Tull in UK mode. And I don't mean United Kingdom, I mean the band UK, featuring, of course, Eddie Jobson, John Wetton, Alan Holdsworth, Bill Bruford, and then later, of course, Terry Bozzio. So the reason why I compare this concert to a UK album or performance is, of course, because Eddie Jobson is here, and he did contribute to a lot of the writing on the A record. But this performance has a fire to it, and especially if you compare it to the Den Haag Netherlands performance from the Stormwatch tour, which I think is excellent, but at least until they get to the older material where they sound like they're kind of tired and worn out. This recording breathes new life into a lot of those older songs, such as Hunting Girl, which is going to rip your face off. The new guy at the time, Mark Craney, brings an eagerness to his performance that could only be described as youthful exuberance. And sometimes it's a little much. Like sometimes it's like, whoa, man, watch the double kick. But I have to say, as a long-term Jethro Tull fan, there's something refreshing about hearing somebody who's really excited to be there and is excited to pound away. And whenever I hear this recording, it just makes me sad that we lost Mark Craney so young, and that he was basically unable to play drums after a while. Because I think had he stayed with the band, he would have matured, and he may have gone on to be one of their very best drummers of all time. Obviously, another big plus to this recording is the fact that we get most of the A album. And, you know, I'm the kind of Jethro Tull fan that it's not like I hate hearing the Aqualung and Locomotive Breath sequence. In fact, I think that there's something about the repetition of it that makes every time you hear it, it's like, okay, how are they going to do it? How are they going to lend a new take on this? However, these songs aren't necessarily the ones I'm dying to hear because they are played so often. So the fact that we do get like the Pine Martin's jig here, and it blows me away every time I hear it, or Working John, Working Joe, Crossfire, which isn't even really a great version, but it's just nice to hear something different, you know, and also like Batteries Not Included or Uniform. These are songs that you just don't hear on every Jethro Tull release. So I feel like LA Sports Arena 1980 is very special, particularly for the performance, which is spirited. Ian Anderson is in good voice. His flute playing is excellent. But there seems to be a new energy to the band. And by the time you get to 1982, with Jerry Conway behind the kit, this is all gone. So I feel like this is a really special moment in Jethro Tull's history. It was brief. It didn't last very long, but it's lightning in a bottle, man. It's excellent. And the other thing to say is that the mix work here by Steven Wilson places you right inside the recording. Your environment is converted to a three-dimensional Jethro Tull concert. So it's full immersion, full escapism, and that's what we're here for, folks. This is at number 3, but it's number 1 in my heart. I really think any number of these top 5 I could argue as my number 1. So we're going to move on to number 2 now. And at number 2, I have Landover, Maryland, 1977, as included on the Songs from the Wood country set. I'm going to dispense with the current trend that I've had in this video saying that Jocko Joxic mixes aren't as great as the others, and include a Jocko mix as my number 2. And the reason for this is that I think that with the video included, you get something that none of these other box sets offer, and that's a complete evening with Jethro Tull experience, audio and visual working together. The audio on this one is probably the best of the Joxic mixes, and that could very well be that I don't have much to compare it to. There's not a Steven Wilson mix of this era, so I can't say which one is better. But I actually find this one pretty decent overall. Even the 5.1 mix seems rather balanced. But what saves again for me is just being able to see them live on stage and get to experience that. And yeah, Madison Square Garden is probably the most iconic Jethro Tull video, but this might be the best simply because it just captures them on just a random night somewhere in America, just doing their thing. And get a number of unique tracks here. You get classic songs from Songs from the Wood performed when they're new and the band are really excited by them. You also get like Velvet Green, which is a song that was not really played much, if at all, after this tour. And you get to see Barry Barlow cart out the medieval drum set and play that, which, oh gosh, it's so wonderful. And you can see Palmer playing the portative organ, which is a huge feature of the Songs from the Wood album. So I just think in terms of capturing an era and a time and place, this is one of the best performances included on any of these box sets. And if you don't have the Songs from the Wood box set, you owe it to yourself to track it down. I think you'd really enjoy it. Also, you get to see Palmer imitating Ian Anderson in the infamous smashing of the cymbals when Palmer comes out and smashes him. The end of the show is kind of making fun of Anderson. That cracks me up so much. Really cannot recommend this concert enough. So moving on, my number one. You're not going to be surprised by this if you've been paying attention, because I've been kind of hinting at it all the way. But my number one is the Bursting Out album, as included on the Inflated edition, remixed by Steven Wilson. So I have talked ad nauseum about my love for this box set, and I'm not sure if there's anything that I can say new about it. I'm kind of in this trap of repeating things I've said in other videos, but what I love about it is that it not only captures a great performance, but given that it's something that has been called together, I think that it creates something that doesn't necessarily exist, and that's a perfect performance of the 1978 Jethro Tull. Add to this the fact that Steven Wilson has moved mountains to make the 24-track Berne recordings line up with the 8-track German 78 recordings. And you really cannot hear that much of a difference between the two sources, which is an incredible feat of music engineering and music production. And it makes it an experience that has me smiling from ear to ear for the entire 2 hours or however long the performance goes on for. I like the fact that you do get overdubs, even though they do stand out. You're still hearing Ian Anderson from 1978 sing these parts. So I don't feel like it's in any way anachronistic. And the overdubs actually do serve for my enjoyment of the material. So Bursting Out is my favorite. I can just put this on anytime, and it puts me in a great mood. I think that the surround mixing is very involving. It maybe doesn't sound quite as good as MSG 1978 or LA Forum 1980, but it sounds fantastic. And it does, again, replicate the stage placement where you have Palmer a lot on the left. You have the bass guitar kind of leaning to the left. Maybe you might hear some of Palmer's keyboards drifting into the back. But you also have like Martin on the right side, or stage left as it were. And you have Evans kind of trailing into the back speakers with Ian Anderson dead center. But it also involves you in the audience. So you're not just kind of sitting as a spectator with the band in front of you, as a lot of these mixes can be. But Steven Wilson's mix places you directly within the headspace of the recording, which it's not necessarily realistic, but in terms of an experience listening to an album, I find it very involving, and I find it to be extremely immersive and great escapism too. So I love this recording. I love this mix, and the Bursting Out album Inflated Edition was a really easy choice for number one for me. But what's yours? Let me know in the comments, what are your favorite Jethro Tull live recordings? Now, at some point, I think I will do a video in which I address some of these other recordings that are included on these box sets. I just left them off in order to streamline this, and also to give myself something a little extra to talk about in the future if my friend Jocko, again, not Jocko Joksic, if my friend Jocko does appear and wants to do some more content with me. So don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and also subscribe to the channel. I have lots more stuff planned in the near future. One of the things I hope to do is I will be ranking the Jethro Tull studio albums. That's something that my audience has been asking me to do for a long time. I've been slowly kind of working on it. It's a huge monumental task to go through these many recordings, because I'm probably going to have to end up ranking the Ian Anderson solo albums within that list. So if that's something that you are looking for, I will certainly be more encouraged to create that if this video does well. And the way this video does well is if you watch it, but also if you like it, comment on it, and of course, subscribe to the channel. All right, that's it for me for today. Thanks again for joining me. My name is Ian, and we will see each other very soon. Bye-bye.